Compulsive goodness. As far as he remembered, Raman was brought up as Mishra's son in the village, Kurzi in Bihar. He was intelligent and hard-working, but he dropped out of school for the sustenance of his old mother and himself. He had to earn to keep alive. Mrs. Shugandha Mishra was a childless widow of 50 who worked on the farm or household of the affluent villagers. Similarly, Raman was a very capable farmhand, and he could earn well by his honest, skillful, and hard work. He didn't appear physically to be the biological son of Mrs. Mishra, as their features were contrasted. She was fair, he was darkish. She was attractive when young, while Raman had rough, rustic face and body. Once, when he was taunted by some of his school friend that he was not really Mrs. Mishra's son, he was upset and asked, "Tell me, mother, whether I am your son or not." She replied, "Yes, you were not born out of my womb, but you are more than my son. We may not be related by blood, but by the deeper bond of love. When you were hardly a few months old, I found you left on the steps of the temple in Hardwar. I had gone there for pilgrimage. I was a widow without any child. I picked you up in my arms and brought you home. I had brought you up with love and care more than what I could have given to my own child, carried in my womb for 9 months." Mrs. Mishra's eyes became moist, and so was Raman's. She took him in her arms, and for some time Raman basked in the glory of motherhood. From his childhood, he was loving, cheerful, and helpful, not only with respect to his mother but to anyone in the village, even those who disliked or hurt him. Thus, he showed signs of compulsive and unconditional goodness, love, and friendliness. He did the domestic chores in his own home, serving his mother like a pet when she was sick or tired. He started doing this service to anyone who was sick or in need. When he saw an old woman carrying a heavy pitcher full of water, he offered to take and carry it to her home in spite of her affectionate protest. Similarly, whenever he saw an old man carrying a heavy load on his head, he will insist on sharing the burden of the man who was panting and sweating. As he grew up to be an adult, he started mediating successfully between two fighting groups, counseling them to resolve their conflict peacefully. He would do so when there was a conflict in the family or extended family. He was often more effective than the village panchayat, village court. Sometimes when he intervened in a violent quarrel, he would himself get hurt, and seeing his bleeding body, both parties would agree to dissolve their fight and nurse Raman back to health. His goodness was innate and compulsive, like a flower which has to exude its fragrance. In this sense, he was not doing a favor to someone, nor was he motivated with any moral or religious principle. He didn't expect any gratitude or return or even praise for his good acts. It was a self-expression which was of his obsessive goodness. His marriage was a byproduct of his goodness and helpfulness to anyone in distress. Somehow, he came to know that a pretty but poor girl was kidnapped to be sold in the flesh trade in the city. He ran to rescue her and got wounded in the process, but saved the girl from her tragic destiny. He married the girl, whose love was mixed with gratitude and respect for her savior. His wife not only appreciated his goodness but joined him willingly in his activities of support and loving kindness. When there was communal tension between religious or caste groups, he would jump in the fray. He even sided with the poor workers protesting against the exploiting masters. He was successful in cooling down both sides and nip the conflict in the bud and come to a settlement. Once, a thief and burglar entered his house. There was not much in the house to steal. The thief was disappointed and he collected whatever he could. Some utensils and silver temple housing Krishna, precious and sacred possession of Mrs. Mishra. Raman, though awakened, pretended he was asleep and observed the thief in his operation. He was thin and emaciated youth who appeared to be hungry, and was trying to find some eatables. As he was hungrily gobbling piece of bread and banana, Raman came to him with a plate of food and offered it to the thief. After he finished eating, Raman told him, "You look unwell, perhaps jobless. You can take whatever you had collected except the temple, which is my mother's. And I will certainly not inform the police. I can even give you some cash to tide over the difficulties you are facing." The thief was surprised by Raman's friendly attitude. And with moist eyes he fell at his feet, asking his forgiveness. Raman took him in his arms and let the thief go with some cash gift. He was a changed person and became a good friend with Raman later on. He was eclectic and liberal in his attitude to religion. He visited both temple and mosque and did arti and namas, both with feeling. He used to serve the places of worship, cleaning the place and serving the priests, Pandit or Maulvi, who taught him about their own faith. He would participate in repair, painting etc. of such places. To some people, it appeared a little strange, but to Raman it was simple, since he didn't know or care to know the religion or caste he was born in. Some priests wanted to confine him to their faith and were not happy with Raman's attachment and respect for two or more religious sects. Thus he was a victim, poised between two magnets both attracting and repelling. But he managed this ambivalent and dual forces tactfully. He had to face something more serious brewing in the ambience. Communal tension reached to a violent level in and around the village. It was not easy to pinpoint the cause and genesis, as to who threw the first stone. Some incidents of loot, fire, stabbing, kidnap and sexual assault on women of the other community were reported, partly factual and partly as rumors, which aggravated the situation. He tried to cool the fire, but it was not easy. He came to know Muslims had abducted a Brahmin Hindu girl. He knew the family which was also involved in the riots. But he undertook to rescue the girl. He got an easy entry in the Muslim camp as they were about to assault the girl. He rescued her, receiving a couple of wounds on his arms. When he delivered the girl to her parents, they were so grateful that they wanted to reward him for his brave deed. Raman unsurprisingly refused any gift. But he said, "I don't want any reward. It was my duty which I didn't do for any reward. However, there is one thing I am going to ask you. I am sure you will not deny me. A couple of girls of Muslim community have been kidnapped by you and your friends. Release them and I will escort them to their own home." The Hindu men, who included rioters, were so much grateful to Raman for rescuing the girl of their community that they agreed, and the Muslim women were released and safely escorted by Raman to a Muslim camp and home where they came from. There were many such incidents in which he played such an angelic role. Later, in a bloody battle between the two groups, Raman couldn't persuade them to lay down their arms and stop their violence. In this process of mediation and reconciliation, when the fight was on, he got wounded seriously. Mrs. Mishra and his wife came to the spot to take him to a hospital. She said, chastising both the sides for their shameful and brutal behavior. Seeing the bleeding Raman and listening to Mrs. Mishra's angry admonition, both parties somehow retreated. Later, Hindus and Muslims took care to see that Raman survived, and Raman did survive. And his compulsive goodness touched many hearts in the village. Like evil or more than evil, compulsive goodness is contagious, an angelic virus.